Hello, welcome to Hay Tour, probably one of the most visited tours on Dartmoor. Sorry about the wind noise, it's always windy here. Just going to give you a little bit of information about some of the clays I use at Powdermills. First of all, just about tours generally on Dartmoor. These tours, these lumps of rock, were formed 300 million years ago, and they would have been hot magma-y type stuff that have cooled to stone. But the interesting thing is, these lumps of rock would originally have been 1 mile under the ground surface. So they would have been quite deep, all of them. And a mile's worth of rock and land above them has eroded away in that 300 million years, and we're left with these rock outcrops to look at and climb and generally enjoy on Dartmoor. And I'm going to walk up this particular rock and just point out some information about Dartmoor clay. Right, so here you can see a ridge of land. On the other side of that ridge of land is a valley, and in that valley 30 million years ago, two plates of the earth crust were moving and rubbing against each other, and consequently, as well as all the weathering that was happening, there was what they call tectonic activity, which is when the two plates of the earth's crust rub together. And so all sorts of different rocks and minerals were formed as the ground was under pressure. And then in that river valley, there were rivers that carried what was called kaolinite, in other words, china clay, and it moved it. And it moved it towards the sea. Okay, so I'm going to move around here. And if you look very carefully, you will see the sea out there. There it is. So as the water moved down that valley, carrying all this stuff that was being formed from hot squashed rock and minerals, there were lakes where the water pooled and slowed down on its way. And where it did that, it started to drop some of the things that it was carrying. One of the things it was carrying was clay. So it's china clay that's moved, picked up all sorts of impurities, all of which are useful, and formed little lakes. And they were dropped. Now, can you see these white scars in the land down there? See those? They're clay mines. Some of the most commercially wonderful mined clays are being pulled out of little lakes that were there 30 million years ago. That clay was dropped there 30 million years ago. And that clay was basically formed from land above and around the tors that were once underground. All that stuff has now disappeared. Plus we had tectonic activity, i.e. plates moving around, lots of pressure, and rivers moving the results in that valley down towards the sea. And that clay that it was carrying was dropped. Now that is Heathfield, Newton Abbot, and now the main company down there is Sibelco. Used to be WBB, and that's where I'm going to pick up some clay samples. Okay, so here we are back at the Pottery, and thanks to the very nice people at the clay quarry, here we are, a nice bag of clay from one of the clay pits we could see from the top of Hay Tour. And here we are, nuggets of clay. Now what I will do with this is I will dry this clay out completely. This is still got a bit of dampness in it, It's not brittle. It's not totally soft. You wouldn't be able to throw a pot with it in this consistency, but it's still got a lot of dampness in it. So what I would do now with this is dry it out so that you have very clay nuggets, and some of the nuggets will be huge. And I'm going to show you how I make a clay slip from this clay. A slip is just clay soup. It's a bucket of clay soup which I dip finished pots into to coat their surface. This particular clay, I know, responds really nicely to wood firing and ash and ember. So let me show you how I take this to a slip. There's a lot of bits and pieces of gravel and sand and all sorts in this clay, and that has to come out. Okay, so here we have the finished bucket of clay soup with all of the bits and pieces strained out, and hopefully just about the right amount of water. And what we do with this is we coat pots that have been made and finished, which I don't actually have, but I've got a pretend one here. We do the finished pot, you'll dip it in, and the Dartmoor clay will coat the surface, and it's that surface which reacts in the wood kiln so well with flame and ash and ember. And there you are, that's how you make a Dartmoor clay slip. Thanks for watching.